Hollow Creek was a village shrouded in silence. The whispers of wind through the trees were the loudest sounds. The villagers kept to themselves. They knew the stories. They avoided the old Blackwood Manor. It loomed at the edge of town, dark and menacing. No one dared to go near. Children were warned never to even look at the house. Cursed, they called it. Some said they could hear screams coming from inside. Of course, no one dared to investigate. The Blackwood Manor held its secrets close, and the villagers of Hollow Creek liked it that way. The stories about Blackwood Manor always circled back to a woman. They called her Old Lady Blackwood. She lived alone in the manor, a recluse. No one had seen her in years. Some said she had vanished, disappeared without a trace. Her only companion had been a mirror, a large antique thing. It stood in the parlour, cold and unwelcoming. Legend claimed the mirror was cursed. It was said to steal souls, to trap them within its glass forever. The mirror was blamed for Old Lady Blackwood's disappearance. Now it remained in the manor, a silent sentinel to whatever darkness lurked within. Thomas was new to Hollow Creek. He didn't believe the stories, not really. He thought they were just silly superstitions. He craved adventure. He longed to prove his bravery. So, when his friends dared him to go to Blackwood Manor, he didn't hesitate. A storm raged that night. Rain lashed down and the wind howled like a banshee. Perfect. The eerie weather only fueled Thomas's sense of anticipation. He stood at the foot of the hill, looking up at the manor. The old house seemed to watch him back. Its windows were dark, empty eyes. A shiver ran down his spine, but he pushed it aside. He wouldn't be deterred. Not tonight. The front door creaked open as if inviting him in. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decay. Cobwebs hung from every corner like ghostly drapes. Dust covered every surface. The house was silent, except for the sound of the storm raging outside. Thomas cautiously made his way down the hallway. Each step echoed in the silence. He could hear his own heart pounding in his chest. His eyes darted from side to side, trying to pierce the darkness. He felt like he was being watched. He stopped to listen. But there was nothing but the storm and the sound of his own breathing. He continued on, drawn deeper into the manor's clutches. Section 5. The Mirror's Cold Gaze. The parlour was at the end of the hall. Thomas could feel it before he saw it. The temperature dropped. The air grew heavy. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. His breath caught in his throat. The mirror. It was even larger than he imagined. It dominated the room. The frame was made of dark wood, intricately carved with images of skulls and ravens. It was cracked in several places, and the glass had a strange, almost liquid quality to it. It seemed to draw him in. He could see a faint glow emanating from the mirror's depths. It called to him. He couldn't look away. Thomas took a step closer to the mirror. He could see his reflection, but it was distorted, twisted into something grotesque. He raised his hand and his reflection mimicked the movement. But then something strange happened. The reflection continued to move on its own. The shadows in the mirror swirled, and he saw images flashing before his eyes. A woman in a black dress, a man with cruel eyes, a struggle, a scream. They were fleeting glimpses of the past, visions of the woman who once lived in this house. He realized with a jolt that these were scenes from her life and her disappearance. The visions in the mirror grew more intense. Thomas watched in horror as the woman was dragged towards the mirror by a shadowy figure. He could hear her screams for help, but they were muffled, distant. She reached out, her fingers scraping against the glass as if trying to claw her way out. Then everything went still. The shadows receded, and the mirror's surface was once again calm. But Thomas felt a cold dread creep into his heart. He knew what he had seen. He understood the fate of the woman who once lived here. She had been trapped in the mirror, imprisoned within its depths. Thomas stumbled back from the mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. He needed to get out of this house. He turned to flee, but his foot caught on a loose floorboard and he fell. As he fell, his hand shot out, instinctively trying to break his fall. His hand slammed against the mirror's surface. The cold glass seemed to grip his hand, holding him fast. He tried to pull away, but it was too late. The shadows in the mirror were alive. They swirled around his hand, tendrils of darkness reaching out to grasp him. Panic surged through him. He thrashed and pulled, but the mirror's grip was too strong. He felt a sharp tug, and then everything went black. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. The villagers cautiously approached Blackwood Manor. They had seen Thomas go in the night before, and they feared the worst. They peered through a broken window into the parlour. Their eyes widened in horror. The mirror stood in the centre of the room, its surface reflecting the room as normal. But where Thomas's reflection should have been, there was only the ghostly image of a woman. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes wide with terror. Her hand was pressed against the glass, her fingers splayed as if frozen in a desperate attempt to escape. The villagers knew then that the curse of Blackwood Manor had claimed another victim. Thomas was gone, lost forever in the mirror's cold embrace.